Now we'll turn to other major story here on DW, which is India and Pakistan, where we are hearing the news from the US. Donald Trump announcing that the two sides have agreed to cease hostilities for the moment. We're also hearing from Islamabad as well that the Indians have agreed to this ceasefire.
The Director General of Military Operations of Pakistan called the Director General of Military Operations of India at 15:35 hours earlier this afternoon. It was agreed between them that both sides would stop all firing and military action on land and in the air and sea with effect from 1700 hours Indian Standard Time today. Instructions have been given on both sides to give effect to this understanding. The Directors General of Military Operations will talk again on the 12th of May at 1200 hours. Thank you.
I would just remind you of what led up to this. There were days of cross-border shelling and missile and drone attacks between Pakistan and India. And this was triggered by a militant attack in Indian-administered Kashmir last month. And of course, as we mentioned, US Donald Trump says there were talks mediated by the US. And of course, we heard the statement from India there. Now we have team coverage on this. DW's India Bureau Chief Sundar Petersman in Delhi and DW reporter Binish Javed here with me in studio. Let's begin with you, Binish, here in studio before we go to Sandra in Delhi. How is this going down in Pakistan?
So I was just listening to Pakistan's Foreign Minister and also Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Ishaq Dar's interview to a local Pakistani news channel, Geo News. And in that interview, he said that there will be a full-fledged ceasefire with India starting at 4:30 p.m. local time. He also said that there were few countries that played a very active role in the last 24 hours. And he mentioned Saudi Arabia, he mentioned US, Turkey, UK, that all of them played an aggressive role and helped get to this ceasefire. He also said that military channel between the two countries began. There was communication, has already started between two countries. He then also mentioned that Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif was leading the process and the army chief also was, of course, involved in the process. He congratulated the Pakistani public on this ceasefire. Of course, tensions were extremely high. There was a lot of anxiety and worry. As you have mentioned, there were days of escalation. There was a lot of worry, and with this news, it has come with it's a big sigh of relief for people in Pakistan.
Let's get the view from India. Sandra, how is this being received in India?
The narration here is obviously slightly different. We already heard India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri, and in his statement, he made no mention of US involvement or any other third party. And in fact, that was confirmed to us by sources a short while ago. According to our sources, the stoppage of firing and military action between India and Pakistan was worked out directly between India and Pakistan. In fact, it was worked out by the two Director Generals of military operation of the two countries. According to India, it was the Pakistani Director of Military Operations who picked up the phone, called his counterpart here in India. Then discussions took place, and we know, in fact, that there was a high-level meeting in the afternoon here between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his senior military and security leadership. Then a decision was taken, and the ceasefire is already in effect since 5 p.m. local time here. And I would also point to another detail that I find very important, that there will be another call between the two Director Generals of Military Operation on the 12th of this month at noon. So it very much sounds like a temporary ceasefire. with ongoing negotiations, probably in the background. But really striking here to me is that India makes no mention of any US involvement, despite the fact that US Secretary Marco Rubio has been in direct touch with both sides in the last 24 hours. India, that has to be understood, is fiercely protective of its very independent foreign policy.
Sandra, just staying with you, I find that remarkable because not too long ago, after the militant attack happened, we saw these two sides refusing to collaborate in terms of an investigation. So what changed?
I think hostilities changed the picture here. We saw an escalation on a scale that we hadn't seen since 1999. So these were the worst escalations in the last 3 decades, with heavy civilian casualties also on both sides, with constant attacks with drones and missiles. It was an unprecedented scale, especially this element of drones also adds something unpredictable to this whole scenario. And these two are nuclear powers after all. And in the end, there was lots at stake, lots at risk. And so in the end, I think probably both came to the conclusion, aided by diplomatic pressure, which was there, that it's better to talk to each other. And of course, India makes the point that it was Pakistan who picked up the phone, not India, because India has always maintained that to de-escalate, it needs Pakistani action first.
Binish, did you see this coming, the ceasefire?
I mean, first of all, as Sandra mentioned, we saw days of extremely high escalation between two countries, both of them with very, very strong rhetoric against each other. There were like clashes on the border, missiles, drones and strikes across the border. So this is very, very unprecedented. The conflict for many people in the region entered very uncharted territory. But what we saw in the morning, especially after these Indian strikes on Pakistani air bases and then Pakistan's retaliation, what we saw that with the statements that were coming from Indian officials and from Pakistani officials, where they started mentioning the word de-escalation. They were saying that if Pakistan will de-escalate if India reciprocates. And I think there was some signal in this statement that maybe despite this escalation, there is something going on behind the doors, and we may hear something along that lines. And after a couple of hours, we've seen that at least now we see that there is a ceasefire agreement between the two countries.
Let's turn back to Delhi. Sandra, we see that this is a ceasefire, but obviously there'll be a need for something more concrete. Who would be able to help these two nations sort this out? Which countries have that sort of good relations and the leverage to be able to host such talks?
Well, obviously, the two key players here in the region are, for the Indian side, certainly the United States, because they are perceived to be rather close at the moment. And then on the Pakistani side, the closest ally would be China, for sure. But we have also seen the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia taking action here. They have been diplomatically active, have been communicating to both sides. So all these could be players, and maybe we learn more as time progresses, because again, let me stress, the Indian position is that on May 12th, noon, there will be further talks between the Director Generals of military operations from both sides, and then we will see if the ceasefire really holds, if it is firmly put in place beyond the 12th of May. And then I think negotiations would be a next step. And what we are looking at is, in the end, to stop these hostilities at a political solution that involves the Kashmir conflict, which Kashmir as it is a divided region between India, Pakistan, with a small portion also controlled by China. India and Pakistan think that they should control and own this territory completely, but at the moment it is divided between the two of them, and that is really the root cause of hostilities between these two countries.
Okay, we'll leave it there for now, but we appreciate your insights. DW's Sandra Petersman in Delhi and Vinesh Javid here in Berlin. Thank you both.